The galaxy had always looked down on Earth as a backwater world, a place of oceans and dirt and small cities not worth notice. And when the alien armadas turned their eyes toward humanity, they laughed because they saw weakness. They saw a species that had never fought beyond its own sky, and they mocked the idea that such creatures could ever resist. Their fleets of steel and fire across the stars, the alien broadcast was loud and cruel, their voices dripping with arrogance as they called. Humans, fragile, soft animals that should kneel or be wiped away, entire colonies shook with fear. People whispered in dark halls, wondering if their lives would end before the next sunrise, and across the chaos, one man sat silent. His name was Elias. Cain, and he did not laugh, he did not cry, he did not even tremble. He only watched Cain. He was quiet not because he was weak, but because silence gave him time to see what others missed while the alien fleets roared their engines across the void. He studied their formations, their weapons, the way they moved like predators who thought themselves invincible. His eyes traced every broadcast, every sneer, every cruel promise they made to Earth, and he stored it away like pieces of a puzzle. He never raised his voice in council meetings. He never shouted when others panicked. Instead, he sat still and listened until the moment passed, and then he whispered simple words that carried more weight than the loudest speeches the people around him did. Not know what to make of him. He was not decorated like the admirals. He was not a genius inventor like the scientists. He was only a man who seemed to calm in a storm, but those who had served under him before remembered he had never lost a battle. Not once. And yet the aliens did not even know his name to them. He was invisible, a quiet human, too small to notice, and too unimportant to fear. And that was their first mistake. The first invasion began at Mars, where human defenses collapsed within hours. The alien warships tore through the orbital lines as if they were toys, and the colonies screamed for help. Cain watched the destruction from the control chamber of a hidden station far beneath the surface of Luna, his eyes fixed on the burning feeds. He saw the alien cruisers swarm like sharks, and he heard their laughter echo across the comes Earth. Cannot fight back. Earth will bow. Earth will be dust. Cain whispered softly, "They believe we are nothing, but they are wrong," as the days passed. The alien fleet spread deeper, taking asteroid belts and mining stations. Each time they left messages mocking humanity. Sometimes they showed entire cities burning. Sometimes they showed prisoners kneeling in silence while alien officers laughed. And Cain watched every image, not with rage but with cold calculation. He saw how the aliens moved in victory, how overconfidence spread through their ranks, how discipline broke down when they believed they could not be challenged, and he waited. Because silence is not surrender, silence is preparation. Among the leaders of Earth, many argued for negotiation, many begged for surrender. But Cain's voice cut through the noise when he finally spoke. "No, we do not bow, because if we bow now, there will be no Earth left to save." The room fell silent, not because his words were loud, but because they were certain, spoken like stone, unshakable. The council stared at him, but few believed one man could stop an armada. Still, Cain did not argue. He simply nodded and left to prepare alone. He walked the dim halls of the Luna station, with only a few officers who trusted him. These officers remembered battles long ago, when Cain had taken impossible odds and somehow twisted them into victory. They called him the silent commander because he wasted no words and showed no fear. Cain knew humanity's fleets could not fight the aliens head-to-head, not yet, but he also knew something the aliens had forgotten. Wars are not won by the largest guns. They are won by knowing where to strike, when to strike, and how to make the enemy bleed without warning. The alien commanders spread their power wide. Across the solar system, too sure of themselves, they mocked the humans, openly broadcasting challenges, demanding Earth's leaders come forward to kneel. Cain sat in silence in the dark of his command chamber, while the flicker of alien faces glared across the screen. His eyes never blinked, his hands steady against the glass table. One of his officers whispered, "Sir, they call us animals, they say." "We are already finished," Cain replied softly. "Let them believe it." That night, as Cain began to move in secret, he called for old ships, forgotten freighters and miners left to rust in the belt. He gathered engineers who still had courage. He ordered drones that had once built cities to be reshaped into weapons. None of it looked like a fleet, none of it looked like power, but Kane saw the pieces of something greater while the aliens laughed. Humanity prepared. In silence, the first human counterstrike was not meant to win. It was meant to whisper back. Kane sent a handful of drones, hidden among shipping barges, to slip into an alien formation orbiting Ceres. The aliens did not notice. They were too busy laughing, too sure of themselves, until the drones awakened and tore into the engines of a cruiser. The explosion lit the dark like a sudden star, and the aliens froze. Kane whispered into the quiet, "So begins the war." The galaxy did not understand at first. One ship lost meant nothing to the Armada, but the story spread. A human strike against the mighty fleets. Big rumors carried the name the Quiet Human, the one the aliens ignored but could not catch. Kane did not confirm or deny the stories. He simply prepared for the next move, and the aliens continued to mock him, calling him a coward, calling him a ghost. But behind their laughter, shadows of fear began to grow, because the one they mocked had drawn first blood. Aerith's people huddled in fear. Kane walked among them quietly, never speaking of victory, never promising miracles, only telling them, "Hold fast. We are not finished." His words were simple, but they carried weight, and in the silence that followed, people began to breathe again. Colonies that had been ready to surrender held out a little longer. Soldiers who had thought themselves doomed stood taller and whispered, "If the Quiet Human can fight, then so can we still." The alien broadcasts filled the stars, their laughter rolling over. The comes they promised Earth would fall. They promised Kane would be crushed. Yet in the dark corners of their fleets, some began to ask questions. How had a primitive human struck them down? How had their great armada lost even one ship? Whispers spread, doubt grew, and Kane listened to it all through stolen signals, watching the cracks form in their arrogance. On the eve of the next attack, Kane stood alone before the viewing glass of the station. Earth's hanging blue and fragile beyond the dark. He said nothing for a long time, then whispered words only the stars could hear. They believe silence is weakness. They will learn silence is the last sound before the storm. And as his officers prepared to launch the next strike, the man they once ignored became the shadow that haunted the galaxy. The alien broadcast spread across the stars, louder than thunder, mocking humanity with every word they spoke. Their voices filled with cruel laughter, and their screens showed the burning ruins of Mars and Ceres. They called Earth a nest of insects too weak to resist. They said humanity would soon kneel or be turned to ash. And across every colony, people trembled because they knew the alien armada had power beyond anything humanity could match. Their ships were vast, their weapons unstoppable, their numbers endless, and yet in the middle of the storm, one man remained silent. Elias Kane sat in the dark command chamber of the Luna station, his face calm as the alien voices filled the room. His officers looked to him, waiting for anger or despair. But Kane did not react. He watched, he listened, and he waited. The aliens named him in their taunts. They called him the Silent One. They laughed at the idea that one human thought he could challenge them. They showed images of him stolen from Earth, broadcasts, and mocked his stillness. His quiet face, to them, it was weakness. To them, it was proof that he was nothing. But Kane did not care. Their laughter was fuel, their arrogance a weapon. And in his silence he began to build the shape of their downfall. Then the colony's despair grew. Families huddled together, waiting for the end. Some leaders begged the council to surrender. Others called for desperate last attacks that would burn more lives for nothing. The council itself was divided, filled with shouting voices drowning in fear. And still, Kane said almost nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and sharp. "We kneel now, we lose everything. If we stand, there is still a chance, even if they laugh." His words carried across the chamber, and silence followed, not because he shouted, but because they felt the weight of his certainty. Yet still many did not believe. They shook their heads and whispered that Kane was mad, that one man could not turn the tide against an armada. But Kane did not argue. He let their doubt wash over him like water on stone. In the hidden workshops of Luna, engineers worked night and day under Kane's orders. Drones were reshaped. Freighters rebuilt weapons carved from scrap metal and stolen alien tech. Kane walked the halls silently, watching every detail, correcting small mistakes with a gesture or a quiet word. His officers wondered how he saw so much, how he noticed things no one else did. But Kane did not explain. He simply kept moving forward one step at a time because he knew every piece mattered, every wire, every bolt, every calculation. In the silence of the station, the weapons of resistance were being born meanwhile. The aliens spread deeper into the solar system, taking stations and belts, leaving trails of fire behind them in their arrogance. They began to grow careless. Discipline broke in their ranks. Soldiers mocked the humans. Openly on public broadcasts, some even staged games, where they forced prisoners to fight each other while alien crowds cheered. Kane saw it all, and though his face never changed, his eyes grew colder, because he understood something. The aliens did not cruelty makes enemies fear at first, but in time, it makes them burn with anger. And when anger joins silence, it becomes unstoppable. Rumors spread across the colony, stories of the first strike at Ceres, where drones hidden among freighters had destroyed a mighty alien cruiser. Whispers carried the name of the man who planned it, the quiet human. Some called him Ghost, some called him Shadow, some said he was not real at all, but the fear in the aliens' voices when they spoke of him proved otherwise. The legend grew, and Kane let it grow. He never confirmed it, never denied it. He simply watched as the story carried across space until even the children of Earth whispered it in the dark. If the quiet human fights, then maybe we can survive. The alien leaders grew angry at the whispers. They sent out messages calling Kane a coward. They mocked his people again and again. One broadcast showed a captured human soldier forced to kneel as alien officers jeered. They shouted, "Your quiet human cannot save you. No human can." Kane watched in silence, his officers furious, their fists clenched, their eyes wet with rage. But Kane only whispered, "They want us to break. We will not break. We will answer in silence." And still Kane's plan grew in secret. Every move built on the arrogance of the enemy. He studied their patrols, their supply chains, the way their fleets scattered wide across the system, chasing resources and spreading fear, and he chose his target. It's not the largest ship, not the strongest fleet, but a convoy of fuel haulers guarded lightly because the aliens thought no one dared strike them. Kane moved his hidden fleet, small ships, drones, freighters remade into weapons, and when the convoy passed near the shadow of Jupiter, Kane gave the order. The attack came like a whisper in the dark. Sudden and sharp drones slipped between the haulers, their engines masked until the last second. Then fire ripped across the void, explosions blooming, silent and terrible. The aliens screamed over the coms as their fuel reserves turned into stars. The haulers shattered. The escorts tried to fight, but Kane's traps tore them apart one by one. When it was over, half the convoy was gone, and Kane's fleet had vanished into the dark, leaving nothing but burning wreckage behind. The galaxy felt the shock. The aliens raged in fury, but beneath their anger, fear began to spread because the quiet human had struck again, not once, not by chance, but twice now, and each time he had chosen his target with precision. Each time he had made them bleed without warning, and each time he had disappeared like a shadow before they could catch him there. Laughter grew thinner now, less sure their mockery, less confident. Still they boasted, still they promised to crush him, but their voices trembled at the edges, and Kane heard it. Alan, the colony's hope sparked for the first time in months. People whispered, "The quiet human is out there. He is fighting. He is winning." Kane's officers reported the whispers to him and asked if they should confirm his legend. Kane shook his head. No, let them believe what they must. Let the story grow bigger than the man, because the story cannot be killed. The officers nodded because they understood. Kane was building not just a fleet, but a fire in the hearts of his people. And once that fire burned, it would spread beyond the reach of any armada. But the aliens were not blind forever. Their commanders began to plan traps designed to draw the quiet human out. They leaked false information. They spread bait across the stars. Kane saw it all. He studied their false moves and smiled softly. "They think me careless," he whispered. "Let them think it. For every trap they set, he learned more about their weaknesses. For every boast they made, he saw deeper into their pride, and in his silence the storm grew stronger." A cold night in the command chamber, Kane stood alone, the stars burning beyond the glass, his reflection faint in the dark. He whispered words no one else could hear. "They mock us because they do not understand silence. They laugh because they do not see the storm that comes after the quiet. They will see soon enough. They will see, and in that moment, the quiet. Human became more than a man. He became the shadow that haunted every alien dream and the hope that carried every human heart into the battles yet to come. The first alien warship, too. Fall to Kane's hand was a wound that the Armada tried to hide, but could not the second. Strike at the fuel haulers was a cut deeper than the first, a reminder that their power was not untouchable. And though they still laughed, their voices were sharper. Now their arrogance strained. The galaxy watched and whispered of the quiet human. Struck from the shadows and vanished before the flames died, entire colonies whispered his name, though many had never seen his face. Kane, Elias Kane, the silent one in the hidden command chamber of Luna Station. Kane sat before the wide glass where Earth floated in the distance. His officers gathered around him, their eyes filled with hope and fear, because they knew the aliens were angry now, and an angry enemy was dangerous. One officer said, "Sir, they will come for you. They will set a trap. The Armada cannot allow this humiliation." Kane's eyes never left the stars when he answered softly, "They will, and we will walk into it, but on our terms." The trap came sooner than expected. Alien broadcasts spread across the system, announcing a great convoy of weapons moving through the outer belt. Their voices dripped with mockery, daring the quiet human to try again, daring him to show his face. The broadcasts spread too far, too easily. Kane studied them in silence, his fingers tracing the data lines across the table. He saw the way the aliens wanted him to look. He saw the bait shining bright against the dark and still. He whispered. Wigo's officers were uneasy, some even frightened. They knew the aliens wanted him to strike. They knew the Armada was waiting, but Kane's calm never wavered. One by one they obeyed his orders. Ships prepared drones, loaded hidden weapons. Primed. Kane moved his fleet not toward the convoy, but toward the shadows beside it, an empty stretch of space carved by old gravity storms. Where sensors twisted and signals bent, the aliens thought they had built the trap, but Kane had already begun to close his own around them. The alien fleet waited, hidden among asteroids, massive warships, silent in the dark. Their commanders confident that the quiet human would fall into their jaws. They had studied his strikes. They thought they understood his tactics, but arrogance is a blindfold, and they wore it proudly. As Kane's fleet approached the bait convoy, he slowed not because of fear, but because he had seen the glint of hidden engines behind the rocks. His lips curved faintly in the dim light, and he whispered to his officers, "They wait for us in the dark. Let them wait." Kane. His first move was silence. He let the convoy drift, untouched. The aliens grew restless in their hidden positions, waiting for the attack that did not come then. Kane sent a single signal, a burst of false data that made it appear his fleet was breaking position, moving toward the convoy. The aliens surged forward, their engines burning through the asteroids. In their hunger to catch him, they revealed themselves. One by one, the trap opening its jaws, and in that moment Kane gave his command. Spring the storm from the shadows of the gravity storm. Drones exploded into life. Swarming from every angle, they struck the alien ships before they had formed ranks, tearing into engines and sensors, turning order into chaos. The aliens fired wildly, their beams cutting through rock and debris, but striking nothing of Kane's true force. His fleet slid like knives through the broken asteroids, striking at weak points, vanishing before counterfire could find them. The battle became confusion, the mighty alien ambush turning into a cage for themselves. Kane's voice was calm over the coms as he directed each move: strike and vanish again. Do not stay to be seen. Hit their eyes, hit their mouths, hit their breath. His ships obeyed each order like pieces of a perfect machine. Every alien ship that burned lit the darkness brighter and still. Kane's expression never changed. He watched, he measured. He guided while the aliens raged in confusion, their laughter gone, replaced with fear. Battle lasted hours, though. To the aliens, it felt like moments. Their trap shattered, their ambush broken, until their warships one by one fell silent, drifting dead in the void. When it was over, Kane had lost almost nothing, his fleet sliding back into the shadows, leaving wreckage behind. The alien commanders screamed their fury across the channels, promising vengeance, promising fire, but their voices shook, and Kane heard the fear buried deep within them. His answer was silence. Across the colonies, the story spread faster than fire. The quiet human had walked into an alien trap and left with their warships. Burning people who had lost hope began to believe again. Whispers filled the air in every outpost, every hidden shelter. Children spoke his name. Soldiers spoke it to Kane. Kane, the silent human who broke the fleets. Kane himself did not answer the whispers. He sat in his chamber, his eyes on Earth, his hands folded as if waiting for the next move. The alien leaders gathered. In fury, their pride bleeding from every wound Kane had given them, they argued, they shouted. Some demanded the destruction of Earth at once, others demanded the capture of the quiet human alive to break his legend. Still others warned that arrogance had cost them too much already, but the loudest voices won. As pride often does, they vowed to end him no matter the costin'. The days that followed the alien broadcasts changed, no longer pure mockery. Now there was anger. Now there was desperation. They called Kane coward. They screamed that he hid behind tricks, that he could never face them in open battle. They tried to draw him out again and again. Kane listened to every word, his face calm, his voice steady. When he finally spoke to his officers, he said, "They do not understand. We are not finished. We are only beginning." Kane's next move was bold. It's not just a strike, not just a whisper, but a message. He targeted a communications hub orbiting Neptune, one that carried alien broadcasts across the system. Instead of destroying it, he took it whole, capturing the station and silencing the alien voices, then broadcasting his own as voice. Low, steady across every channel, across every colony. "I am Elias Kane, a son of Earth," the aliens mocked. Us, they thought us weak, but they will learn silence is not weakness, silence is preparation. "We will not kneel, we will not break, we will fight, and we will win." His words spread across space, heavy and sharp as steel. The galaxy froze at his voice. The legend had a face now. The quiet human had spoken, and his words were not loud, but they carried more than thunder. For the first time, humanity had an answer to the alien arrogance. For the first time, the people stood taller, no longer only in whispers, but in open voices, chanting his name, chanting his words. And in the shadows of his calm, Kane watched as fear began to burn hotter in the alien Armada, because they knew now he was not only a ghost, he was real, and he was coming. The aliens swore vengeance, swore fire and destruction. They gathered their fleets tighter, more careful, more watchful. But the damage was done. The silence had ended. The whisper had become a storm in Kane. The quiet human had turned their mockery into the first taste of fear. The galaxy would not forget. The alien Armada had grown restless. They had suffered too. Many small cuts at the hands of one man, and though they were vast, though their fleets covered the stars, like a storm, they could not ignore the whispers anymore. Kane, the quiet human, was no longer just a rumor, no longer just a shadow. His name carried across every colony. His voice had been heard across the system, and even in their own ranks. Fear began to move quietly beneath the surface. Their commanders shouted, their soldiers roared, their broadcasts filled with threats, but beneath it all, their eyes flickered with unease. And Kane knew this fear was the weapon he had sharpened since the first strike. Now the aliens gathered a new plan, one born not of calm reason, but of wounded pride. They prepared a vast trap, one designed to catch him and end the whispers forever. They spread word of a massive supply fleet moving through the Kuiper Belt, its cargo filled with weapons and fuel, its escorts strong but not overwhelming, the perfect bait. Their voices mocked across the channels, daring the quiet human to come, daring him to strike again. And when Kane sat in his silent chamber and watched the feeds, he saw the arrogance dripping from every word. He saw the teeth hidden beneath the smile, and still he whispered softly, "We go." His officers looked at him with unease. They knew the aliens were waiting. They knew this was no careless convoy, but a snare with claws. One officer said, "Sir, if you go, they will close the jaws around us. They will not let you slip away this time." Kane's eyes remained calm as he answered, "Then we will make the jaws." Close on themselves, preparations began in secret. Kane moved his small fleet through the shadows. Drones disguised as broken debris, ships hidden in the wake of asteroids, decoys spread through the black. He studied the positions of alien patrols. He traced the false data trails they had laid for him, and with every layer of deception he uncovered. He smiled faintly, because he saw their pride blinding them once again. They believed he would come blindly. They believed he would rush for their bait, because they still could not see that silence is never blind. Silence sees more than shouting. Eyes ever could. The supply fleet drifted through the Kuiper Belt, its escorts alert its signals, loud enough for every ear in the system to hear, and beyond the convoy hidden in cold space. The alien ambush lay waiting, warships crouched like predators, their weapons locked, their commanders whispering of triumph. They waited for Kane to fall into their net, to strike and die as a fool. But when Kane's fleet finally moved, he did not strike the convoy first. He struck the shadows. The battle began. With silence broken by sudden fire drones that had drifted unnoticed, ignited into swarms, cutting into the flanks of the hidden warships before the convoy even trembled, the aliens roared in shock, engines burning to life as their ambush turned. Against itself, beams of light tore through the black, chasing enemies. They could not see, and Kane's fleet slid between them, striking quick, vanishing quicker, his voice calm across the coms. Strike their eyes, strike their ears, take away their breath. Explosions flared one after another. The asteroids glowed red from the heat of burning engines. The convoy panicked, scattering in chaos as Kane's shadow weapons tore through escorts and haulers alike. The aliens tried to regroup, tried to tighten their jaws around him, but every time they closed, he was already gone, moving like smoke between their teeth until their trap became a cage for themselves. One by one, their warships fell into silence, drifting lifeless in the void. Kane's officers watched in awe as his calm commands guided them through impossible lines. Every move he made seemed predicted, every counter already prepared. Some whispered that he must see the battle before it even began, that he knew the shape of victory before the first shot fired. Still Kane remained silent, his face calm, his eyes sharp, his voice never rising above a whisper. Aliens raged, their commanders screamed into the channels, their soldiers fired wildly, but none of it mattered. Pride had blinded them again, and now their fleets paid the price when the last of the ambush ships burned. Kane's fleet vanished into the darkness, leaving only wreckage and silence behind them. Galaxy erupted with whispers again. The quiet human had not only walked into the trap, he had shattered it, leaving the Armada broken and bleeding. The colonies, who had doubted now, began to believe in full. Their voices, it's no longer just whispers, but shouts. The quiet human fights, the quiet human wins, and in the alien halls of power, anger turned to fear. Leaders shouted louder than ever, mocking him, calling him coward, trying to drown out the truth, but their soldiers knew their citizens, knew their pride was breaking, and Kane knew as well. In the chamber of Luna Station, Kane stood alone, watching the stars, his officers behind him waiting for orders. When one finally asked, "Sir, why do you never celebrate? Why do you never smile at victory?" Kane's answer was simple: because this is not victory, not yet. They will come again with more fire, with more fury, and when they come we must be ready. Silence is not joy. Silence is patience, but in the quiet of the chamber. Kane allowed himself a single whisper, one no one else heard. They thought they could trap the silent man. They thought arrogance could close the storm, but silence does not walk into traps. Silence turns them inside out, and in the stillness of the stars, the quiet human prepared for the next battle, knowing the Armada would never stop until he ended them completely. For the first time in many long months, the people of Earth and the scattered colonies felt the spark of hope. Their voices carried through the stations and mining belts. The quiet human had broken the traps of the alien Armada. He had struck again and again, leaving wreckage where once there had only been fear. Whispers turned into shouts, and shouts into open cries of defiance. The humans who had once trembled now began to raise their heads again. Soldiers who had doubted now sharpened their weapons and trained harder. Because if one man could stand against the fleets, then perhaps all of humanity could rise behind him and strike back. With fireliest, Kane stood in the command chamber of Luna Station watching. The new tide spread across his people. He saw hope burning where only despair had lived before, and though his face remained calm, his eyes held the faintest shadow of relief. His officers gathered around, reporting the colonies rallying to Earth's call, engineers building new ships with renewed energy, miners offering their metals without hesitation. factories working day and night to produce weapons. Kane listened to it all in silence until finally he spoke softly, "Hope is the fire they cannot put out." The alien broadcasts grew louder with rage, their commanders furious at the loss of so many ships. They tried to drown out human hope with threats promising that Earth would burn, that the quiet human would be hunted down and crushed, but the more they shouted, the less people believed them, because every promise of destruction now carried the memory of their defeats, and every threat reminded the colonies of the legend of Canaan. The Council of Earth leaders argued, still some calling for negotiations, some still whispering surrender, but this time their voices were weaker, their power fading because the people no longer wanted surrender. The people wanted resistance. They wanted to follow the man who had turned silence into a weapon. They demanded Kane lead them not only in the shadows, but openly as the face of their fight. Kane stood before the council, his voice steady as stone. "We will not kneel, we will stand together. If you give me the fleets, I will show you the path too." Victory some still doubted, but the tide of the people was unstoppable, and so Kane was given the command he had never asked for, supreme commander of the defense of Earth and all colonies. Yet he did not change his manner, he did not raise his voice or boast of triumph. He only returned to his chamber and whispered to his officers, "The title means nothing, the fight is what matters." The first great step under his command was uniting the scattered fleet's fragments of ships once led by rival admirals who rarely trusted each other. Kane brought them together not with loud speeches, but with his quiet certainty. He listened to their doubts, he heard their anger, he let them speak, till their voices burned out. Then he spoke a few words, low and steady. "Together we survive, divided we die," and the admirals who had once been proud bent their heads. They knew the truth in his words, and so the fleets of Earth began to form as one engineers. Across the system worked like never before. Drones and freighters turned into warships, factories carved new weapons from the bones of asteroids, and every colony sent what little it had to the cause, because the legend of Kane had become greater than fear. He walked the halls of the factories silent. Watching workers laboring through the night, he spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight stronger than steel. "Hold fast, we are not finished." Meanwhile, the alien leaders could no longer ignore him. They gathered their forces tighter, forging an answer to the quiet human they built, a super dreadnought, a ship unlike any other, vast enough to blot out stars, its weapons able to shatter moons. Their broadcasts spoke of it with pride, their voices dripping with triumph. "The dreadnought will end the human ghost," they said. "The dreadnought will crush his fleet and burn his world." Kane listened to the broadcasts, his expression calm as always, only whispering, "Every monster has a weakness." When news of the dreadnought reached Earth, fear tried to return. Some whispered that Kane could not win against such a weapon, that no man could stand against a fortress in the stars. But Kane never let the fear spread. He gathered his officers and spoke softly, "We do not fight strength with strength. We fight pride with silence and patience." They looked at him uncertain, but his calm was like stone, and their fear broke against it like waves. The day came when the dreadnought moved into human space, its engines thundering its sighs, filling every sensor screen, the alien broadcasts mocking louder than ever, daring Kane to come out and face them. The people of Earth held their breath, knowing that if Kane failed, all hope would shatter. Kane himself stood before the viewing glass, his eyes steady, his voice soft. "Prepare the fleet." The battle that followed stretched across the dark. Kane's small fleet darting around the massive dreadnought, striking at its escorts, tearing them apart before turning their eyes on the monster itself. The dreadnought roared, its cannons flashing beams of light that tore through space, destroying asteroids and decoys in bursts of fire. But every time it tried to pin Kane, he was already gone, sliding through the dark like a shadow, his voice calm over the coms. "Strike the joints, strike the eyes, strike the breath hours." Past the dreadnought bleeding, piece by piece, its pride turning into desperation. Its commanders shouting in panic as their monster began to falter. Kane pressed forward, never with rage, never with noise, only with silence and certainty. Until at last the great beast shuddered and broke, explosions tearing through its vast frame. Until the ship, once called invincible, burned in the black and fell silent. The galaxy froze. The aliens, who had mocked, who had laughed, fell silent across their channels because their greatest weapon had been destroyed by the man they once ignored. The colonies erupted in cries of triumph, people no longer whispering hope but shouting it like thunder. The quiet human had faced the impossible and won, and in that moment, humanity awakened not as a broken species, clinging to survival, but as a rising force, ready to take the war back to the stars. Kane stood in his chamber, his officers around him, their eyes shining with awe and hope, but Kane's face remained calm, his words steady. This is not the end. This is the beginning. They will come again with greater fury. They will not stop until we end them. Completely prepare, because the true storm is still to come. The galaxy held its breath as the alien dreadnought came into human space. It was larger than any ship humans had ever seen, its shadow stretching across the stars, its hull bristling with weapons that could tear moons apart. The aliens filled the channels with their mocking voices, daring the quiet human to face their monster. They promised that this battle would be the last. They promised that his silence would end with fire, but Kane did not answer their laughter. He stood in the command chamber of his fleet, watching the dreadnought through the viewing glass, his face calm, his voice steady as he gave the order, "Prepare the lines." His officers moved quickly, their hands shaking but their faith unbroken, because they had seen what Kane had done before. They had seen him break traps and fleets with nothing but patience and precision, and so they followed even as fear grew inside them. Kane walked among them, speaking softly in words that cut through their fear. "This ship is not invincible. No beast is without weakness. We will find it, we will strike it, and we will live." The dreadnought moved closer, its engines rumbling through the void, its escorts sweeping ahead. Like a tide of steel, the alien commanders shouted their confidence across the channels, their laughter filled with cruelty. "We will end you today, quiet human. Your people will kneel, your silence will die." Kane listened without anger, without fear. He simply whispered, "Let them laugh the first." Clash came at the edge of Neptune, where the escorts surged forward, hunting Kane's fleet. Beams of fire cutting across the darkness. Kane's ships darted through the storm, small and quick, striking at weak points, then vanishing before the dreadnought could bring its weapons to bear. The escorts fell one after another, confusion spreading through their ranks, because the humans did not fight like other enemies. They did not stand and trade blows. They cut and slipped away like shadows, and always Kane's voice guided them. "Strike their eyes, strike their breath. Do not linger, do not let them see you." As the escorts burned, the dreadnought moved closer, its vast cannons turning toward Kane's fleet. A beam tore through space, brighter than a sun, vaporizing an asteroid in a single blast. The humans felt the shock even from afar, their eyes wide at the power. Kane only whispered, "Do not fear power, fear pride." And then he moved his fleet into the storm. The battle became a dance, Kane's small ships darting around, the giant beast striking at its joints, at its weapon ports, at the vulnerable seams between its armor, every move guided by Kane's calm voice, every strike measured like the steps of a master game player. The dreadnought roared, its cannons blazing, but its size made it slow to catch the shadows that sliced around it, and every time it fired it revealed more of itself. Every time it tried to strike, Kane saw deeper into its weaknesses, past the void filled with fire and wreckage. The dreadnought shuddered under the weight of Kane's relentless strikes, pieces of its hull tearing away, escorts gone, weapons silenced, but still it fought.
Ow.
Its commanders screaming in fury, its guns roaring louder than ever. Kane's fleet began to bleed. Small ships lost drones, shattered officers whispering in fear that they could not last much longer. But Kane's voice never wavered. "Hold fast, we are not finished." At the height of the battle, the dreadnought turned its full fury on Kane's flagship, beams lancing toward him, tearing through the void. His officers cried out, their hands scrambling over controls, alarms screaming, but Kane stood still, his eyes locked on the burning monster before them, his voice a whisper. "Now we see it there, the breath of the beast. Strike it now." His fleet responded, striking where he pointed, at the great venting ports hidden along the dreadnought spine, the weak point. No one else had seen the place where its power flowed, and with every strike fire poured from the wound. The dreadnought screamed, its cannons faltering, its engines shuddering explosions blooming across its vast body, its commanders shouting in panic across the channels, no longer mocking, no longer laughing. Only fear. Kane's fleet pressed harder, striking again and again until the great beast trembled, and then with one last roar, it broke apart, flames tearing it to pieces. The monster once called invincible falling silent in the black. The galaxy froze, every channel filled with silence, because no one had believed it possible the dreadnought had been the pride of the Armada. The weapon that would break humanity, and yet it now burned broken across the stars, destroyed by the quiet. Human and his fleet, the colonies, erupted in joy, their voices rising like thunder. The quiet human has done it. He has destroyed the monster. We are not finished. We're not weak humanity lives. But Kane did not smile in the chamber of his flagship. He stood still, his hands steady, though the floor shook from the last echoes of battle. His officers cheered, their eyes bright with hope, but when one turned to him and asked, "Sir, we have won, have we not?" Kane's answer was soft. "This is not victory. This is survival. They will come again with greater fury. They will never stop until we end them completely." His words carried heavy across the room, and silence followed, because his officers knew. He was right. The dreadnought was gone, but the Armada was not. The pride of the aliens was wounded but not broken, and wounded pride is dangerous. Kane himself felt the ache of the cost. His fleet scarred, his soldiers weary, his own body worn, yet he did not falter. He only whispered to himself, "The beast is dead, but the storm is still to come." News of the battle spread across the galaxy, and even among the alien people whispers began. Some questioned their leaders, some doubted the endless mocking voices. Some began to wonder if humanity was stronger than they had been told, and fear began to move in the alien ranks. More dangerous than any weapon, for fear breaks armies from within. Kane knew this, he counted on it, and in his silence he began to plan the next strike, because he understood what no one else did. This war was not about ships or weapons, it was about pride and patience, and in both he would never yield. The dreadnought was gone, but the fire it left behind burned across the galaxy. The wreckage drifted through the void like a grave marker that every ship could see, a reminder that the alien Armada had been broken by the one man they once mocked. The humans did not whisper anymore. They shouted their hope, in every channel. Colonies that had been silent for years now spoke, with strength sending their resources and their fighters to Earth because they believed again. But for Kane, there was no joy, only a heavy calm, for he knew that victory was not yet won. The alien leaders met in fury, their voices rising in rage across their hidden council chambers. They cursed the quiet human. They swore that the shame of the dreadnought's fall would be washed away in rivers of human blood. They ordered every fleet, every weapon, every soldier to prepare for the final strike. They would gather their entire armada, not small groups. It's not scattered hunts, but one massive storm meant to crush Earth and burn humanity from the stars. Kane expected this. He had studied them long enough to know pride would guide them more than reason. They would not let the dreadnought's death go unanswered, and so he waited with patience, as he always had. His officers gathered around him in the war chamber, their maps filled with signals of alien fleets converging from every corner of the galaxy. Some voices trembled, saying, "We cannot face them all at once. It is too much." Others whispered that perhaps surrender might save the colonies, but Kane silenced them with only a glance, his voice calm and steady. "If they come with all their power, they will come with all their weakness. If they gather the storm into one place, then that is where we will break it." His words carried through the chamber like iron striking stone, and even the doubters bowed their heads, because his certainty left no room for fear. Preparations began on a scale no one had seen before. Shipyards roared across the system, miners cut deeper into the rocks, engineers worked until their hands bled, every colony pouring what it had into the fight. Kane walked among them, always silent, always watching, his presence enough to make the tired lift their tools again. When he did speak, it was only to remind them of what was at stake. "This is not for me. This is for all of us together. We rise together. We stand." The people listened because they believed now in him, not as a myth, but as the living proof that humanity could stand against the dark. They called him their defender, their shield, their sword. They sent messages across the stars, not only to him, but to each other, saying, "We are not alone. We are not weak. The quiet human fights, and so do we." Day came when the alien armada arrived. It filled the void with more ships than anyone could count, a tide of steel and fire that stretched from horizon. 2 Horizon worlds trembled, stations shook as the alien broadcasts returned, their voices cruel and confident again. They promised Earth's death, they promised Kane's silence would finally end, they promised fire that would never stop. Kane stood in the command chamber of his fleet, his eyes fixed on the endless storm before them, his voice soft, steady, "Prepare thee." First wave struck with blinding light beams of fire cutting across the black human ships, reeled under the assault explosions, blooming across the void, but Kane's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold the lines. Move as shadows, do not face them head on, strike and vanish." And his fleet obeyed, darting through the storm like blades in the dark, small strikes at weak points cutting. Supply ships tearing command relays apart, slipping away before the larger ships could bring their weapons to bear. The aliens roared in frustration, unable to pin the humans down, their massive fleet growing more chaotic with every passing hour. But the storm did not stop. More waves came, more fire tearing at the humans' officers. Cried out reports of losses filled the chamber, voices shaking with fear. But Kane's calm never broke his words, soft as always. "They are not one, they are many. They will break themselves if we are patient." His eyes never left the vast map of the battle, his mind seeing patterns no one else could see. Days past the battle stretched across the system, every planet, every station, every rock in orbit touched by fire. The humans fought like shadows, always moving, always striking, then vanishing. Morale among the aliens began to fray, their commanders shouting louder, their formations crumbling, their pride turning into confusion. And yet the cost for humanity was heavy, ships burning, soldiers lost, cries echoing through the channels. But even in the darkest moments when officers faltered, Kane was there, his quiet voice steadying them. "We are not finished, we are not broken." At the height of the storm, the alien leaders tried to set a trap. They gathered their strongest fleets in one massive formation, luring Kane toward the heart of their armada. Their broadcasts filled with cruel laughter, promising this was the end, promising that the ghost would finally be caught. Kane listened in silence, then whispered to his officers, "It is time," instead of avoiding the trap. Kane moved straight into it, his fleet cutting through the center like a knife. The aliens roared in triumph, believing they had finally cornered him. But what they did not see was the plan that had been building for months. Kane's hidden fleets, the ships built in silence, the weapons prepared in secret, all waiting for this moment. And as Kane drew the enemy tight around him, the hidden forces struck from every side. The aliens who thought they were hunters became the hunted, their proud armada. Collapsing into chaos, explosions lit the void like suns. Alien voices turned from mockery to panic, shouting in fear as their fleets were torn apart. Kane gave no triumphant cry, no roar of victory. His voice remained calm, guiding his people. Strike their hearts, strike their breath, leave nothing to rise again. His words cut sharper than any blade. His fleet obeyed with relentless precision until the storm itself began to die. When at last the battle ended, the void was filled with wreckage. The once proud armada shattered into fragments, drifting silent in the dark. The aliens who had promised Earth's destruction were gone. Their voices silenced, their pride turned into ash across the stars. Humanity stood bloodied but unbroken, their fleets scarred but alive and stronger than ever. And in the silence that followed, one name echoed again and again: the quiet human in the command chamber. Kane stood unmoving, his officers around him, their faces shining with awe, some shouting with triumph, others weeping with relief. But Kane's face remained calm, his words soft as stone. "This is not the end. This is the turning now." We rise. His eyes looked out into the endless black where the wreckage drifted, and his silence carried more weight than any shout, because the galaxy now knew the truth. The armada had broken, the storm had died, and humanity had endured the wreckage of the armada drifted across the stars, the black void filled with broken ships, torn metal, and fire that would burn for years. Whole worlds watched in silence as the once unstoppable storm was reduced to fragments. There were cheers on Earth and the colony's voices crying out with triumph that the quiet human had broken the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever seen. But Kane did not join the cheers. He stood in the command chamber of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the map of the stars. He knew this was not the end. He knew pride still lived in the enemy, and pride was more dangerous than any weapon. The alien leaders had lost their fleets, their power scattered but not gone in their hidden halls. They raged and wept, their voices shaking. With shame, they could not explain to their people how one human had shattered their strength. They could not admit that silence and patience had undone their pride, so they turned to desperation. They called upon weapons hidden for centuries deep. Machines forbidden by their own kind, devices left from ancient wars that had nearly destroyed the stars. They promised themselves that with these weapons, they would wipe out the quiet human once and for all. They cared nothing for the cost. Nothing for the fire that would spread across the galaxy. Their only thought was revenge. Kane felt it before reports arrived. He knew the enemy too well. He felt the shift like a change in the air. His officers brought him fragments of intelligence, whispers of ancient weapons, moving whispers of systems. Darkening under strange energy, his officers spoke with fear, saying, "These things are not like fleets. These things are storms themselves. We cannot fight them." Kane listened quietly, his face unreadable. Then he spoke softly. "All storms have eyes. All storms can be broken. We will wait. We will watch. And when the moment comes, we will strike." The first weapon appeared above a barren world. It was not a ship, but a vast engine of energy. A living machine that burned the planet to ash in a single wave. Whole populations cried out in terror across the stars. The aliens sent their message again, laughing with cruelty, promising that humanity would be next. Kane watched the flames consume the world, his officers pale with horror. But he did not move. He whispered, "Only not." Yet another weapon appeared near the edge of human space, a dark machine that swallowed light itself. Human fleets moved to intercept, but Kane held them back. His officers argued, voices raised in fear and anger. "If we wait, they will destroy us. If we do not act, they will burn us." Kane's the answer was calm. "If we strike too soon, we will break our strength. If we wait for the opening, we will end." His officers fell silent because they had learned long ago that his silence carried more weight than their fear. The galaxy burned as the alien leaders unleashed more of their hidden weapons. Stars dimmed, worlds fell. The people of Earth trembled, though they still shouted the name of the quiet human, begging him to save them. Kane carried their voices in his silence. He walked among the soldiers, among the engineers, among the children of the colonies, his calm presence enough to still their terror. When he did speak, his words were simple. "We have not come this far to fall. We will endure at last." The opening came. The alien leaders grew desperate. Their pride blinded them to the cost. They gathered their forbidden weapons in one place to prepare for a final strike on Earth. They believed this was the end. They believed humanity would finally break. But Kane had been waiting for this moment. He had been watching the patterns of their rage, the rhythm of their desperation, and now he whispered to his officers, "The storm has gathered. This is where it ends." Every ship humanity still possessed rose into the void, every weapon, every soldier, Kane at their head, his calm silence steadying them even as fear threatened to overwhelm them. The enemy waited with their monstrous machines, the energy around them burning like a second sun, their leaders broadcasting their laughter. Across the stars, "Quiet human," they said, "your silence dies here. Your people will kneel. Your world will burn." But Kane did not answer. He gave no speech, no cry of defiance. He simply raised his hand and whispered, "Advance." The battle that followed shook the stars themselves. The alien weapons unleashed storms of fire that tore entire fleets apart. Human ships scattered under the assault, but Kane's calm voice guided them through the chaos. "Strike." The eyes strike, the breath strike, and vanishes. Fleet obeyed, moving like shadows, weaving between waves of death, striking the weak points. Kane had seen long before the enemy realized their mistakes. One by one, the monstrous machines fell, explosions tearing across their vast bodies. Alien leaders screaming in panic, their cruel laughter turned to desperate cries. Humanity pressed harder. Kane's silence guiding them through the storm, his calm voice cutting sharper than any blade, until the last of the forbidden weapons burned in the void. Their ashes drifting into nothing, the alien leaders cried out in horror. Their power gone, their armada destroyed, their forbidden weapons broken. They tried to flee, but Cain did not allow it. His fleet closed around them, silent and unyielding there. Voices reached across the channels begging for mercy, threatening in desperation, promising that the galaxy would collapse without them. But Cain gave no answer. His silence was the only reply the enemy heard, and in that silence they understood at last that they had lost. When the final alien ship burned, the void grew quiet. No more mocking voices, no more cruel laughter. Only silence, deep and vast and endless. The people of Earth and the colonies lifted their voices in triumph, the name of the quiet human echoing across every channel, across every world. Cain stood in the chamber of his flagship, unmoving, his officers around him, their faces bright with relief and joy. But Cain did not smile, his eyes fixed on the wreckage drifting through the black, his words soft as stone. The war is ended, but the silence remains. His officers asked what he meant, some with confusion, some with fear. Cain looked at them, his face calm. This silence is not mine, it is ours. The galaxy is quiet now because it has seen what we can do. It will not forget. If we hold fast, if we stand together, then no storm will rise again. His words carried through the chamber like a vow, like a promise, that even in the quiet humanity would endure. And so the story of the quiet humans spread not as a tale of one man, but as the truth of a people who refused to kneel, who faced the storm and broke it with patience and silence across the stars. Children grew up hearing the name of Cain whispered with reverence. Leaders spoke of him as the shield and the sword of humanity, and though he himself never sought glory, his silence became the loudest voice of all, for it reminded the galaxy that humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the storm that broke all others.